"I'm sorry, sir, but we only see clients by appointment. And the collection you're asking about isn't for walk-ins." The receptionist's voice was soft and polite, but a blade wrapped in silk is often the sharpest. The middle-aged man before her simply gave a strained smile, nodded, and quietly turned to leave. Not a word of protest, not a single expression of anger. But his eyes, silent and filled with unspoken meaning, had already taken in every detail: the scrutinizing glances, the cold tone of voice, and the way others were welcomed with smiles, champagne, and on a first-name basis. No one in the store knew. They had just turned away the very founder of the brand they were wearing. That man's name was Jackson West. He was 47 years old, and nearly 3 decades ago, he had been the one to first open the shipping boxes, wipe down every display shelf, and single-handedly design the very first shirts in a tiny corner of a suburban mall. From an old sewing machine, a few rolls of scrap fabric, and hands perpetually stained with thread and fiber, he had built Veron Studio, one of the fastest-growing luxury fashion brands in America. From Las Vegas to New York, from Seattle to Miami, the name Veron was synonymous with elegance, sophistication, and a premium experience. But today, he had been kicked out of his own store, not because he didn't have money, but because he didn't look like he had money. The young woman in front of him, with her platinum blonde hair and a chic iPad in hand, knew nothing of the days Jackson had slept on the warehouse floor just to finish orders on time. She didn't know the name Veron was a combination of his mother's name and that of his first sewing teacher, and she certainly didn't know that it was for people exactly like her that Jackson had created this brand, a place where fashion was an invitation, not a barrier for the wealthy. But today, that invitation had been replaced by a velvet rope stretched across the entrance. And what hurt most of all was Jackson's realization that this wasn't an isolated incident. This was the system. In just 3 weeks, the corporate office received 17 complaints, clients being turned away, stopped at the door, profiled simply because their clothes weren't in style, their faces weren't perfectly made up, or their cars weren't luxurious enough to be parked in front of the showroom's glass facade. A young blogger from Arizona, who had saved up for an entire year to buy her sister her dream Veron bag for her birthday, wrote through tears, "I never even made it inside." They looked me up and down and said, "We're not open for public viewing today. You can book an appointment online." I'm 25 years old, and I still felt like a child being shamed for not being good enough to walk into a store. Jackson read that line and remained silent. On the outside, he was a successful CEO. On the inside, he was the same old craftsman who once believed that elegance wasn't in the price tag, but in the way you made others feel respected. And today, that belief was being betrayed by the very company he had built. Step by step, he lowered the iPad, looking out at the Manhattan skyline through his office window. The sunlight reflecting on the glass created a strange image, a man in an expensive suit. But his shadow was that of a man in an old apron, holding a piece of tailor's chalk, his gaze weary. He turned to his assistant. "Cancel all my meetings for tomorrow. I need something ordinary to wear. No logo, no brand. I'm going to see for myself. What happens when someone like me walks into a Veron studio today? His assistant swallowed hard. You're going undercover again? Jackson didn't answer. His eyes said it all. This time, it wasn't a test. It was a rescue mission for the soul of a distorted dream. 10:17 a.m. A lightly sunny Thursday in Beverly Hills. A battered SUV bearing a rideshare logo pulled up to the marble-paved sidewalk. The window rolled down, revealing a man in a faded windbreaker, worn-out jeans, and sneakers whose soles were peeling. Over his shoulder was a canvas tote bag with the Veron Studio logo. So faded you had to squint to recognize the brand. No one recognized who he was. Not a single doorman. Not a single welcoming glance. Only the red velvet rope barring the entrance, like an exclamation point in a world that had completely changed. Veron Studio, flagship Beverly Hills. It was no longer the home of fashion that Jackson had poured his heart into creating. Now, it resembled a lavish fashion museum with lifelike mannequins, marble floors, soft lighting, and a silence so profound it was cold. Jackson walked up, bowing his head slightly like a polite passerby. But his heart was beating with a strange rhythm, a mix of anticipation and anguish. Inside, a woman with pin-straight platinum hair sat behind a glass reception desk. Before her was a brightly lit tablet. Each of her taps cut through the silence, decisive, confident, and emotionless. Her name was Brittany Myers. The nameplate clearly stated her title, Client Experience Liaison, a title Jackson had never approved. She didn't look up until Jackson was standing directly in front of her, waiting with a courteous smile and patient eyes. 20 seconds. Only then did she raise her head. Her eyes scanned Jackson like an invisible barcode, worn-out shoes, unbranded jeans, old jacket, no watch, no accessories, wrinkled tote bag, and then, with a smile as thin as a razor's edge, she spoke. "Good morning, sir. Do you have an appointment?" Jackson kept his voice warm. "No, I was just passing by. Actually, I'm here from out of state, visiting my niece. I've heard about this showroom for a long time, so I wanted to take a quick look. I've been following Veron Studio since the early days, you know." The corner of Brittany's mouth twitched. It wasn't quite a smile, nor was it contempt. It was simply indifference, honed into a skill. "We are currently only seeing clients with scheduled appointments. You can scan this QR code to book a private consultation for next week." She pushed a framed QR code toward him, gently but firmly, like she was placing a barrier between two worlds. Jackson looked up, meeting her gaze directly. "It doesn't say on the website that an appointment is required." "Ah, that's a new policy," Brittany said, without blinking. "We are now focusing on a personalized experience for our high-end clientele. Veron is no longer a place just anyone can walk into." Jackson tilted his head. "I just want to see the new collection. I might buy a gift for my niece. I won't take up anyone's time. This time. Brittany didn't need to refuse with words. Her eyes did the work. Cold, hard, and judgmental. I'm afraid that's not possible. As I said, we serve Veron Black or premium members, and you don't appear to be in that group. Behind her, Jackson caught a glimpse of 4 stylists chatting amongst themselves. No one was busy. There were no other customers, no fittings, no transactions. But Brittany still repeated her final sentence in a tone of velvet-wrapped steel. We are fully booked, and we do not accept walk-ins. In that moment, Jackson said nothing, but inside, a deep crack was silently spreading. He had built this brand as an invitation to all who loved fashion, regardless of class. But today, this place had become a fortress for the elite. And he, the man who laid its foundation, was no longer qualified to enter. He turned and walked away, in silence. And from behind, he heard Brittany whisper to a colleague, "We can't just let anyone walk in off the street. This is Veron, not a shopping mall." Then, a soft laugh. Jackson didn't look back, but his heart had already made a decision. They have no idea who they just turned away, and they are about to pay the price for it. Jackson didn't say a word the entire ride back. Through the window, the glamorous streets of Beverly Hills flashed by like a film in reverse. But in his mind, every word, every look from Brittany was replaying like a scratch on an old record, not because he was rejected, but because he knew if he himself was treated this way, how many others had quietly left in shame. The SUV stopped at an unmarked building, a little-known satellite office once used by the security division for major internal investigations. Jackson walked in without knocking. He was met by Mark Raines, head of security, a former special agent who had handled everything from hackers to industrial design theft. Mark looked up, his eyes sharp behind steel-rimmed glasses. "How was the shopping trip?" Boss Jackson didn't smile. It had the full flavor profile: humiliation, judgment, and a suggestion to shop elsewhere. "Ready to watch the movie?" Mark asked. They entered a small room. A wall was covered with monitors. In front of them sat a young woman with short hair and a petite frame, her fingers flying across a control panel. "This is Jenny Ramos," Mark introduced, IT specialist. She was embedded in the Beverly Hills branch 3 weeks ago. "Sir," Jenny said, her handshake firm, "we found a few things you need to see." She got straight to the point. One screen lit up, the internal dashboard of the Beverly Hills branch. Jenny zoomed in on a strange chart. The appointment-only policy doesn't exist in the official system. No memo, no email from corporate. No one at headquarters was notified. Chad Dawson, the branch manager, implemented it on his own 4 months ago. She clicked the mouse, revealing a series of internal emails. One line made Jackson's fist clench, temporarily piloting a VIP program, prioritizing a luxury experience. Standard guests should be directed to external partners, Mark added, like a second twist of the knife beneath the beautiful facade. "We discovered a customer scoring system, platinum, gold, standard, not based on purchase history, but on appearance, license plates, clothing, and zip code. Jackson was silent, but his expression darkened like a gathering storm. Who assigns the labels? 99% of them. Brittany Myers. Jenny replied. She was formerly a concierge at a luxury hotel. No retail experience. But she has a full set of skills for judging by appearances. Another screen lit up. A log of rejected customers over the past month, 143 cases. No one was rescheduled. No one was offered an alternative product. They were just looked at, judged, and shown the door. Jackson swallowed. So where is the high revenue coming from? Prices are inflated for platinum clients. They think they're getting limited offers, but they're actually being charged up to 30% more. Inside, there's a Veron Black program, a name never approved by corporate. Jenny typed a few more commands. And there's more. She opened an internal video clip. A stylishly dressed man was sipping an espresso under perfect lighting. Jason Miller, posing as a VIP client. He's actually a small-time actor hired to create a fake image of luxury. The items he bought were never paid for. It was just for photos and to post the hashtag #VeronBlack, #style above all. Jackson's voice was grim, an illusion. They created an entire fake reality just to make other customers feel inferior. Mark wasn't finished. And there's a second set of books. David, my internal accountant, discovered that high-end orders were being falsified. 30% of the revenue was siphoned off, funneled through a shell company account, registered in Chad Dawson's own name. A cold reality formed in Jackson's mind. This wasn't just a lack of oversight. This was a sophisticated, systematic, and deliberate betrayal. He turned to Mark. I want them to look me straight in the eye. And I want every employee, every customer to know what was happening behind that luxurious glass. You're going public. Not yet, Jackson replied, his eyes like frozen water. First, we let them dig their own graves. He paused, then turned to Jenny. I need all the documentation sent to the legal department. And Mark, yes, call reporter Sarah Jimenez from the City Journal. Tell her she has an exclusive if she's at Veron Beverly Hills at 2 p.m. Jackson adjusted his collar. And I need a suit. But this time, it's not for a disguise. It's to end their performance. 1:59 p.m. On the famous Rodeo Drive, amidst a sea of luxury brands, 4 black SUVs pulled up in unison in front of the Veron Studio flagship store. The vehicles were unmarked, except for a small emblem, just enough for any internal employee to recognize these were high-level executive cars from headquarters. Inside the showroom, Brittany Myers was still at her desk, her eyes glued to the iPad screen, her polished nails tapping rhythmically out of habit. She didn't look up until a strange silence fell over the room. She raised her head, and suddenly, her heart skipped a beat. The glass doors had just opened, and walking in was the man she had rejected this morning, but now dressed in an exquisite charcoal grey suit, a Swiss watch glittering on his wrist, and his eyes no longer accommodating. Behind him was a lineup that made every breath in the boutique catch. Mark Rains, head of security, his ID badge gleaming. Patricia Chin, senior legal counsel, a black leather portfolio in her hand. Marcus Washington, the regional director, a name every employee knew but whose face was rarely seen. And finally, Sarah Jimenez, the political and business reporter from the City Journal. Camera at the ready, voice recorder already on. No one in the room spoke. Jackson walked straight to the desk, his voice gentle but resounding. "Hello, Ms. Myers. I believe I have an appointment today." Brittany shot up from her chair, sending it flying back into the wall behind her. You're Mr. West. I didn't know. And that," Jackson cut in, "is precisely the problem." From the left, a frosted glass door opened. Chad Dawson emerged from a fitting room with a forced smile. Beside him was Mr. Langford. Jason Miller, the actor posing as a VIP client, a smirk on his face, an untouched espresso still in his hand. Chad froze when he realized who was standing before him. "Sir, what a surprise. I didn't know you." "Who I was," Jackson interrupted. His voice no longer needed to shout. His very presence was enough to freeze the entire room. "I am the founder of this brand, and this morning I was denied entry into the very place I once built with hands stained by thread and sleepless dreams." Sarah Jimenez raised her camera. Click. A moment was captured. Jackson turned to the staff and customers who had stopped in their tracks. "I am here not just to expose a few people, but to make one truth clear. This brand has been betrayed by the very people entrusted to protect it." Patricia stepped forward. "This store has been operating with a second set of books. There have been illegal transactions, an unapproved VIP program, and the practice of selling clients to competitors." Chad tried to interject. "There's no proof that's false." Another voice cut through, young, clear, and trembling with courage. "My name is Kevin Liu. I'm a stylist here. I tried to report this, but I was threatened with termination." A female employee stepped forward. "I'm Lisa Herrera. I was penalized for helping a walk-in customer. Brittany told me. This isn't a place for poor people. They insulted customers behind their backs." Jackson nodded. "Thank you. The truth always needs someone brave enough to speak it first." He turned to Chad and Brittany, both now pale. "Chad Dawson, Brittany Myers, your contracts are terminated, effective immediately. All system access has been revoked. All accounts will be investigated. And," he turned to Jason Miller, "Mr. Langford, or rather, Mr. Miller, your acting services also end here, and Mark will be providing you with an invoice for the full reimbursement of fees paid for creating a false image." Jason bowed his head, his hand trembling as he took the envelope. No one in the room came to their defense, not a single sympathetic glance. There was no salvation for those who had judged others with their eyes and titles. Jackson stepped into the middle of the room. Veron Studio was founded on one belief: fashion is not a tool to sort out who is good or who is worthy. It is a way for everyone to express themselves with pride, but you turned it into a fortress of arrogance. Click. Sarah took another photo, and the whole world would soon see the collapse of a fraudulent system. Jackson nodded. Today, we are not just dealing with a few individuals. We are beginning to cleanse an entire culture that has strayed from its original purpose. And the rebirth of Veron Studio officially began here. The showroom was dead silent. Even the hiss of steam from the coffee machine had stopped, as if it, too, knew what was coming. Jackson gave a slight nod to Jenny Ramos, the small IT girl who had been standing in the back, whom everyone had dismissed as the new girl who fixes the network. Jenny stepped forward. Her gaze was steady. She lifted her tablet and connected it to the large screen mounted on the boutique wall, a screen that, until moments ago, had been playing high-fashion ads with a chic soundtrack. The screen turned black. A line of text appeared: internal data, live feed. My name is Jenny Ramos, an IT specialist for Veron Studio. I was embedded in this branch for the past 3 weeks, under direct orders from leadership. A collective gasp went through the showroom. During my time here, I collected data from the CRM system, emails, internal cameras, and transaction logs. Everything was backed up in real time to a secure server at headquarters. What I am about to show you cannot be deleted. The first clip began. On the screen was an email conversation between Chad Dawson and a partner store, sending you a middle-aged guy in a polyester jacket, asking about men's vests. Not our demographic. You handle it. Transfer the money on the weekend. The entire boutique held its breath. A stylist whispered, "That was my uncle. I remember that day. He came home and asked me, why did they look at me like I was a thief?" The second clip came on. The camera was pointed at the reception desk. A middle-aged woman in a tasteful floral blouse stood opposite Brittany. "My niece is getting married. I want to find a really beautiful dress for the ceremony," Brittany replied, her voice casual. "Our collection is far beyond your budget. I think vintage Vine would be a better fit." Immediately after, she turned to Chad, who was standing nearby, and laughed. "I hope she finds a dress and a little bit of dignity." Everyone was stunned into silence. Lisa Herrera, the employee who had been reprimanded for helping a customer, covered her mouth with her hand. Sarah Jimenez, the reporter, clicked her camera relentlessly. The third clip appeared. Jason Miller, the actor posing as a VIP, was striking a pose with a shopping bag. Chad was just off camera. "Hold the bag higher. Act like you actually bought it." "They eat this exclusivity stuff up," Jason replied quietly. "Isn't this the same bag from last week?" Chad laughed. "No one will notice. The flock will eat up anything as long as it has a hashtag." Outrage spread like a tidal wave. A young employee pulled out his phone, opened the customer rejection app, and whispered, "I did this," without knowing who I was helping. A nearby female customer blurted out, "So I wasn't underdressed that day." I was insulted. Jackson didn't need to say anything more. He just looked at Chad's face, now like a stone statue in the middle of a storm. And then David Chin, The embedded financial officer stepped forward. "My name is David Chin. I've been working in this branch's accounting department for the past 4 weeks." He held up his tablet. "We discovered a dual accounting system, one version sent to corporate, and an internal version that hid the real cash flow." He tapped the screen. Columns of numbers appeared. 30% of the revenue from Veron Black orders was transferred to an LLC, a shell company, with Chad Dawson's name on the articles of incorporation. Patricia, the legal counsel, interjected, "This behavior doesn't just severely violate internal policy, it constitutes commercial fraud and illegal kickback schemes. The legal team is initiating a full audit." The atmosphere in the showroom seemed to shatter. There was no more music, no more style, only the truth laid bare by data, cameras, evidence, and confessions. Jackson stepped before them all. "I don't need Chad Dawson. I need a team that knows how to respect people, that knows luxury isn't about rejection, but about how we make others feel worthy." He gave a slight nod. Mark Rains gave a signal. 2 security officers entered. Chad started to back away, but Jackson raised a hand. "You don't need to run. The door isn't closed today like it was when you rejected me. But this time, you will walk through it and never come back." And in the silence that follows a storm, the curtain fell, the charade was exposed, and the light of transparency began to shine through. After Chad Dawson and Brittany Myers were escorted out the door, the very door where they once stood as guardians of privilege, no one spoke. The entire space was still submerged in the aftershock of data, videos, and chilling conversations. But in that silence, something was shifting. It wasn't shame. It was opportunity. Jackson walked slowly through the showroom, a place that had once been as cold as a gallery of power. But now, every employee looked at him with eyes that were no longer distant. Someone was quietly shedding tears. Someone else was clenching their fists. And someone was standing taller, as if taking a deep breath for the first time. He stopped in front of a young man, Kevin Liu, the stylist with glasses and a slightly thin frame, the very first person who dared to speak the truth in front of the entire store. "What's your name?" Jackson asked. "It's Kevin Liu. I've been working here for a year and a half." His voice trembled, but his eyes didn't look away. Jackson nodded. "Do you know that your actions today could change the entire culture of a company?" Kevin was flustered. I just couldn't stand seeing customers turned away because of the shoes they were wearing." He smiled, a gentle but weighty expression. "And for that very reason, I want you to become the client experience director of this showroom." "What?" Kevin exclaimed. I've never managed anyone. I'm still taking night classes." Jackson cut him off. "We can train for skill, but we can't train for character. And you chose courage over silence." A single clap rang out. Then it spread. The whole boutique erupted in applause. Not for a new title, but because a decent person was being recognized in a world that had once only celebrated those with power. Jackson turned to another person, Lisa Herrera, the stylist who had been punished for helping a walk-in. who had been pushed off the schedule for being too lenient. "Ms. Herrera," Jackson said, "I read your file. Your customer satisfaction ratings have always been the highest, even when you were facing disciplinary action." Lisa stood still, not blinking. "I would like to offer you the position of floor manager, the person who will rebuild how we serve, not just with products, but with our attitude." Lisa's voice was thick with emotion. "I used to think my kindness was the thing I was being punished for." "No," Jackson said. "It's what makes you different. And now, it's the reason you're being trusted." Patricia, the legal counsel, gave a slight nod. "You both will receive direct training, and you will have the full support of Marcus Washington during the transition." Kevin turned to Lisa. Lisa looked back at Kevin. They had never been on the same side, but now, the warmth in both their eyes was like an invisible social mask had been removed. In the distance, the customers who had been watching now returned to browsing. An elderly woman in a grey wool sweater picked out a new handbag for her granddaughter. A college student laughed with a friend while trying on his first ever blazer. No one was asked, "Do you have an appointment? Are you qualified? What tier does your wallet belong to?" There were only sentences like, "How can I help you today? This is a new style, but I think it would look great on you." Jackson stood in the middle of the showroom, a place that was once a stage for pretense, and for the first time in years, he saw it return to its true self, not a place for performance, but a place where people could be themselves. The next morning, as the soft sunlight streamed through the tall glass panes of the Veron Studio flagship boutique in Beverly Hills, the door that had once been blocked by a red velvet rope now stood wide open. No conditions attached, no more receptionists with judging eyes, no more separate appointment books for VIPs, no more signs that read, "By appointment only." Instead, a new banner hung high across the main entrance. "Everyone welcome, no appointment necessary." The words were simple, but they seemed to make even the falling light feel softer. Jackson West arrived early. No entourage, no high-end suit, just a man with a cup of hot coffee in his hand and a quiet gaze, watching the space he had once built, once lost, and was now beginning to bring back to life. He walked in. For the first time in months, no one looked him up and down. Instead, a young employee greeted him with a genuine smile. "Good morning. Welcome back to Veron Studio. Sir, inside." Everything was still luxurious, but now, the luxury no longer had a sharp edge. The reception desk had been moved to the side, no longer a gatekeeping station for customers, but simply an information hub. The espresso bar was still there, but now it served everyone for free, no ranking score needed. A live feedback corner was installed, a touchscreen, allowing customers to leave comments instantly, with no filter. Jackson walked slowly through each display area. The mannequins in Veron attire now not only looked high-end, they were arranged in a way that felt approachable, friendly, interspersing ready-to-wear lines with high fashion. No more class-based zones. No more invisible prejudice. In the fitting area, Kevin Liu, now the client experience director, was helping a teenage boy pick out a shirt for his first date. No rushing, no pressure, just patience and an encouraging nod. In the handbag section, Lisa Herrera, the floor manager, was chatting with a middle-aged woman about a gift for her recently graduated daughter. Their conversation wasn't about the price tag, but about the meaning behind the gift. And in the middle of the showroom, there were first-time visitors walking in without hesitation, without caution, without feeling like they were being scanned by judgmental eyes. They felt welcomed. In the temporary office in the back, Jackson opened his phone. The screen displayed a live feedback dashboard from the nationwide system. The messages were brief, but heartwarming. First time I've been served at Veron today without being asked about an appointment. My little girl smiled the whole time because the stylist told her. Everyone has their own kind of beautiful. I came back because I felt valued, not for my wallet, but for me as a person. Thank you for doing the right thing. I'm telling my friends. In the bottom right corner of the screen, a small text displayed customer satisfaction rate plus 63% in just 24 hours. Walk-in traffic increase plus 148%. Positive social media mentions trending. Veron is back. Jackson put his phone down. He closed his eyes for a few seconds, not to rest, but to listen more clearly to the heartbeat of something he thought he had lost. A brand, a vision, and a promise that luxury should never be defined by exclusion. He stepped back out into the showroom. At the entrance, an elderly couple stood hesitating. The husband wore a wrinkled striped shirt. The wife carried a canvas tote bag, their eyes not daring to step inside. But before they could turn away, Kevin approached them, his smile as friendly as the morning sun. "Hello, we're so glad you stopped by. Were you looking for anything special?" The husband gave a small smile, squeezing his wife's hand gently. "We just wanted to pick out a graduation gift for our granddaughter." "Then you've come to the right place," Kevin replied, as if it were a deeply ingrained habit. Jackson watched the scene unfold. Inside him, it wasn't sales figures or titles, but belief that was slowly returning. This boutique had once been a symbol of exclusion. Now, it was beginning to become a symbol of inclusion. 2 days later, the entire Veron studio system began to transform. It was no longer just one refreshed Beverly Hills store. Now, every showroom from New York to Seattle, from Chicago to Austin, began to dismantle the invisible barriers that had stood for far too long: the appraising glances, the tiered procedures, the unspoken policies favoring the right kind of client. It all started with a short memo from Jackson, sent system-wide, starting today. Every Veron boutique will operate under the Veron Welcome Standard: respect, equality, directness, no profiling, no hidden preferences, no quiet discrimination, and absolutely no one will be turned away simply because they don't look like they belong. In San Francisco, a black mother posted a picture of her daughter beaming in a Veron dress. She wrote, "Last month, we were turned away because we didn't have an appointment. Today, the stylist brought my daughter 3 dresses to try on, with a note that said, You are most beautiful when you are yourself. Thank you for doing the right thing. That post was shared over 70,000 times in 24 hours in Atlanta. A middle-aged man in a factory worker's uniform walked into the showroom with some hesitation. But just a few minutes later, he was personally invited by the manager to have an espresso and was shown a suit that fit his budget and would help him look confident when interviewing for his old job back. The story went viral on Reddit with the headline, "Veron just taught me a lesson. Kindness is unconditional." At the Manhattan headquarters, the customer feedback department had to hire more staff just to handle the thousands of daily emails, not complaints, but thank yous. I used to think Veron was only for the elite. Now I know. It's for people who believe elegance begins with looking at each other with respectful eyes. The papers started writing. Forbes Veron upends luxury fashion strategy with compassion. The New York Times, more than fashion. How a brand is mending its soul. City Journal, from a CEO kicked out of his own store to a model of corporate reform. Market competitors were baffled. How did a brand on the verge of being called out for discrimination transform into a symbol of inclusion in just 1 week? And Veron's own employees were also changing. At the Denver showroom, a young stylist wrote a handwritten note and placed it at the welcome counter. "If you ever thought you didn't belong here, today we have one thing to say. You do belong here, exactly as you are." In Chicago, the staff started a weekly community hour, exclusively for students, retirees, and young professionals new to the workforce, to come in, try on outfits, and get styling advice, completely free of charge. That evening, Jackson hosted a national all-hands meeting online. On the screen were hundreds of faces: managers, stylists, baristas, warehouse staff, all wearing the Veron uniform. But this time, no one felt like they were standing behind a counter to classify people. Jackson stood before the webcam. No PowerPoint needed, only sincere eyes and a clear message. We used to think what made Veron different was the fabric, the lighting, or the design. But now we know what makes us special is how we make others feel valued. He held up a small, handwritten sign. "Luxury isn't exclusion, it's compassion, with style." On the screen, no one clapped. They just smiled and nodded, because they weren't just hearing it, they were living it. Every shift, every welcome, every customer who walked through the door. Veron's studio didn't just make a comeback. It was becoming the model for a new kind of luxury that wasn't found in a price tag, but in the way you were smiled at, as if you belonged there, even if you once thought you weren't worthy. Friday afternoon. The atmosphere at the Beverly Hills showroom was completely different from the days before. It no longer carried the feeling of speak softly for fear of being wrong or stand up straight because you're being judged. Instead, there was a low hum of laughter, the constant sound of the door opening and closing, and the sight of stylists who were truly listening to their customers without judgment, without pretense. Jackson stood by the corner of the accessories counter, an espresso cup in his hand. He wasn't in a hurry. He was observing, like a gardener quietly watching the first green shoots emerge from the earth after a long drought. Suddenly, The glass door opened. An elderly couple walked in, the man in a faded striped shirt, the woman carrying a simple grey tote bag. They didn't look around much. They just entered with hesitant eyes, as if they still weren't sure if they belonged here. Jackson recognized them immediately. It was the same couple Brittany had turned away a week ago, when all they wanted was to buy a small gift for their newly graduated granddaughter. That day, the woman had clutched her bag tightly, the man had stared at the floor, and they had both walked away in silence, leaving a condescending stare behind them. Today, they walked in, no longer with their heads bowed, but there was still hesitation in their steps. Kevin Liu, now the director of client experience, was the first to approach. His smile was like an open hand. "Hello. It's so good to see you again. We remember you were looking for a graduation gift for your granddaughter." "Right." The man paused for a moment. Then he smiled softly. She loved the gift. She just walked around the house with that bag all day. She said she felt like she was walking into her first job wearing a suit of armor. Kevin bowed his head in thanks. "Then we chose right." Jackson walked over. No introduction, no title needed. "I remember you both. That day, you were not treated with the respect you deserved. On behalf of the brand, I want to offer my sincere apology." The man looked at Jackson for a long moment. Then he said gently, "Last week, they told us we didn't fit in here. Today, I didn't hear that. I heard, 'Hello, sir. What can I help you find?'" He extended his hand. The handshake was real, not forced, not heavy. Jackson shook his hand firmly. "I've always believed that luxury doesn't come from a label, but from the way we see each other as people." The wife broke into a smile. "Today, I don't feel like I walked into the wrong place. I feel invited in." As they walked through the showroom, choosing a new gift for their granddaughter's next birthday, Jackson turned to Marcus Washington, who had been standing silently beside him. Marcus said quietly, "You could have brought in a new team from headquarters, retrained the entire system, but you chose the very people who were once ignored to start over." Jackson shrugged, as if the choice was too natural to need explaining. "Because they are the ones who know what it feels like to be invisible, and they are also the ones who know how to make sure no one else ever has to feel that way again." In the distance, Kevin was adjusting the collar of a teenager preparing for his first ever job interview. Lisa was beaming with a group of friends choosing a dress for an engagement party. The barista was serving a student with a savings voucher, a complimentary latte. No one was being profiled. No one was being checked for their class with a glance. The boutique that was once a symbol of exclusion was now a space of compassion, and the handshake between Jackson and the customer he once saw rejected. It wasn't just a handshake between two people. It was a handshake between a brand and the soul it had lost. Saturday evening, the lights in Veron branches across the country were gradually turning off. But in the Manhattan headquarters, the 35th floor conference room was brighter than ever. On the giant LED screen, faces appeared in a grid. A stylist in Dallas wiped her hands on her apron, sitting by her computer. A floor manager in Miami adjusted his headset. A new employee in Minneapolis, having just said goodbye to her last customer, now sat in the middle of the empty showroom. More than 300 branches were attending an emergency meeting, but not to put out a crisis, but to lay the foundation for something that would outlast success culture. Jackson West stood in the middle of the conference room. No presentation, no PowerPoint, just a whiteboard with 3 handwritten words: transparency, inclusion, dignity. He looked straight into the camera. His voice was warm, slow, and utterly sincere. Today, I am not standing here as a CEO. I am standing here as someone who was once kicked out of his own store, not because I didn't have money, but because I didn't look like I belonged. No one laughed. They were silent, because they knew it could have happened to any customer they served. Jackson continued. We turned a blind eye to the small things, a look up and down, a polite refusal that cut like a knife, an unnamed policy of VEP-ification. But it was those small things that destroyed our customers' psychological safety. That is not the Veron I wanted to build, and I believe it is not the Veron you want to work for. On the screen, Jenny Ramos, who had once collected the internal data, appeared. She presented a demo of the new feedback system. Every branch would have a feedback kiosk right in the showroom. Customer feedback would be sent directly to headquarters, with no middle management filter. A real-world welcome score would be updated every 72 hours, with concrete evidence. Next, Marcus Washington announced the contents of the Veron Welcome Standard, built on 3 pillars. Do not profile customers by appearance, status, or spending habits. Do not refuse service unless a customer poses a safety threat. Respect begins with how we see our customers, not through the lens of sales, but through the eyes of a human being with a story. Jackson returned, smiling softly. We used to have the Veron Black Card for special clients. Today, I want to introduce something new, the Veron White Tag. Not a priority card, but a commitment tag from our staff to our customers. On it, there is only the employee's name and a simple promise: I am here to serve you as someone worthy, not as someone to be approved. The tag was held up to the camera. Every stylist, every sales associate, every manager saw themselves in those words. There was nowhere left to hide behind procedures, KPIs, or pretense. There was only kindness, systematized into action. The meeting ended not with applause, but with a voluntary vote. 100% of the branches agreed to implement the Veron Welcome Standard within the first week. That night, Jackson stood by the high-rise window, looking down at the city lights. On his phone, a stream of messages from old customers came in. My daughter walked into the showroom today and wasn't asked if she had an appointment. She was only asked, what would you like to try on first? My father once left in silence after being looked down on. Today he went back and was offered tea by the stylist like a friend. Jackson didn't reply. He just saved them all, because sometimes the most powerful thank you is the small, kind actions that were once missing. That weekend, Jackson West returned to Veron's studio, Beverly Hills, where it all began, not as CEO, not in a suit, no media or cameras, just him and a heart that was listening. The atmosphere in the boutique was no longer cold. It was warm, not because of the lights, but because of the people. A small laugh from a customer, the whisper of a stylist asking, "Do you prefer warm or neutral tones?" A child's exclamation, "Mommy, this dress looks like a princess's." Jackson walked slowly, looking at every corner that had changed. No more velvet ropes, no more gatekeeper reception desk, just a low welcome table with a small sign that read, "We're here to help you feel more confident, your way." In the fitting area, Kevin Liu was helping a young man adjust his suit vest. The boy seemed nervous, but Kevin smiled, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said quietly, "You don't have to prove anything. You just have to feel like yourself. And we'll find something that fits that." The boy looked at himself in the mirror and, for the first time, smiled. Jackson nodded. That one sentence was worth more than $1 million marketing campaign. At the women's dress counter, Lisa Herrera was consulting with an older woman. The woman had initially kept asking, "Are you sure I don't think this style is for me? I'm not a regular customer." Lisa smiled, without interrupting. She just gently draped the dress over the woman's arm and said, "I don't need to know how much you buy. I just need to know what occasion you want to shine for. And my job is to help make that happen." Jackson walked on to the coffee bar, which once only served platinum clients. Today, a little girl in a white dress was laughing with the barista, who handed her a hot chocolate with a cheerful wish. "I hope you have a wonderful first shopping trip." Her parents stood nearby, not wearing designer clothes, but their eyes shone as if they were seeing for the first time. And then, like a beautiful finale, the door opened again. It was the elderly couple from the other day. This time, no hesitation, no bowed heads. They walked straight in, holding hands, and headed for the accessories counter. The man caught Jackson's eye. They looked at each other. No introduction needed. No words, just a nod. A gesture that said, "I came back. And this time, I believe I am truly welcome." Jackson stepped up onto a small platform in the center of the showroom. He raised his hand, gently calling everyone over. "I wasn't planning on saying anything today, but there's something I can't keep to myself anymore." The staff, the customers, even the barista stopped what they were doing and turned toward him. Jackson took a deep breath. His voice was low and full of emotion. "We built Veron's studio to make people feel more powerful through the way they dress. But sometimes, we forgot that real power isn't in the label. It's in the look you give another person. It's in choosing not to judge, but to understand. It's in how you make an ordinary person feel they, too, deserve to walk in, to try on, to choose, and to smile without needing permission." He paused, looked around. Tomorrow, there will be sales pressure again. There will be difficult customers again. There will be the temptation to profile people to make serving them easier. But if we do the right thing over and over again, in how we greet, how we listen, how we serve, then we won't just be selling dresses, bags, or suits. We will be restoring something far more precious: dignity. Applause rang out, not thunderous, but each clap was like a heartbeat, real, clear, and full of empathy. A young employee in the corner of the showroom said quietly, "I never thought being a stylist could feel so meaningful." Veron's studio didn't just survive a crisis, it was reborn, not with a new product, but with an old promise. Renewed. Here, everyone is worthy of being seen. No conditions. 1 week later, Veron's studio recorded its highest walk-in traffic in 3 years. But no one was talking about sales figures. No one was boasting about profit margins or stock prices. Instead, people were talking about a stylist who led an elderly woman by the hand into a fitting room even though the schedule was full. A floor manager who printed out a handwritten letter from a once rejected customer and posted it in the break room as a reminder. A CEO who was once kicked out of his own store, who now stood as a symbol of how a leader can step back to see the heart of their organization more clearly. In Beverly Hills, Kevin Liu, the stylist once threatened for being too kind, was now leading a small workshop on heartfelt hospitality. Beside him was Lisa Herrera, who was once put on probation, now a mentor for the entire West Coast stylist team. They weren't just working, they were rebuilding trust, one customer at a time, one look at a time, one hello at a time. At the Manhattan headquarters, Jackson West received an email from a young woman, the blogger who had been denied entry when trying to buy a birthday bag the year before. She wrote, "I just walked into Veron, Seattle yesterday, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I needed to be cool enough to be served. Thank you for changing, and for not needing me to have a loud voice to be heard." Jackson finished reading. He didn't reply right away. Instead, he forwarded the email to the entire system with a single note attached: "We don't build a brand with marble, but with repeated acts of kindness." What about you? Have you ever walked into a place and felt like you were being judged as not good enough? Have you ever been ignored because your shoes weren't the right brand? Because your bag wasn't in fashion? Because you didn't look like the kind of person who could afford to shop here? If the answer is yes, then you understand why this story needed to be told, and why people like Kevin, Lisa, or even Jackson West himself didn't just change a store. They reawakened a set of values that had fallen asleep. In a world where worth is tagged by a brand name, be the person who chooses to see others with respect, not by their labels. Fashion can change, trends can come and go, but human dignity always deserves to be something that is never marked down. Because true luxury isn't in the price of the item you wear. It's in the look you give when you see a stranger as if they deserve to be welcomed.